Welcome to Socio-Witchery, a show about magic and meaning making. I'm Stacy, sociologist, witch, and energy worker. I talk about how to deepen our craft and our lives by unpacking the ideas and exploring meaning making strategies underneath all kinds of magical workings. Today I want to talk about living sensuously, what that means, why it's important, its relationship to magic, and offer some tips to craft a more sensuous and therefore more magical life. Thanks for being here. Let's unpack and explore. Hi folks, and welcome back to Socio-Witchery. First, I want to apologize to everyone because what was supposed to be a 2-week pause turned into a 3-week hiatus, which I did not plan, so I'm sorry for the delay and just the general lack of predictability. Predictability is admittedly not my strongest suit, but it's important to me that as long as I'm doing the show to be reliable and to not let life throw it off track every 10 minutes. So I am sorry that it threw it off track this past week. So I'll just share a little bit of the backstory. It's been 3 weeks of very different kinds of experiences and challenges for me. I got to spend some time with my daughter when she was on spring break, and then I took a road trip with my dog for my spring break, which I had never done before. He's an older and fairly high-strung dog, but he did really great. And I got to visit Asheville, North Carolina, which is a place I'd long wanted to see. And then when I got back from the trip, Easter was almost here, and that's when I was supposed to be doing the last week's episode. So I was trying to regroup from the trip, and I was putting together a basket to send to my daughter for Easter. And it was my first Easter without her since she was born, and it was my first Easter alone in my life. And so the entire holiday just pretty much kicked my ass, and that's what happened. So there you have it. I got my ass kicked by Easter. But before that, I had some good times and some adventure, and now the sun is shining and I'm in full Ostara mode. Bring on that Ostara balance. That's where I am. So today's episode is about ways to live sensually. And I go back and forth between sensual and sensuous, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But it's really about lots of little things that we can do to attend to our 5 senses, to raise our vibrations. Actually, let me digress for a minute, because I know that words like vibrations and energy can be red flags for folks, signaling that woo-woo nonsense is on the way. And I get that because I very much used to be that way. But let me say this before you roll your eyes and click off. I don't know anything about any of the claims that people make about all matter vibrating at particular frequencies or whether that has any significance for us. I suspect that vibrational energy is a thing and that what's unknown, and therefore the source of disagreement, is whether that has any relevance for us on any level and whether we can even perceive it and all that jazz. And I don't know anything about the answers to those questions, and I don't pretend to. But I do know that I feel more alive when I am living in the present and when I am experiencing the world sensually through my senses, and that those two experiences are related. And I know that I don't have a better word than vibration to describe the feeling of being abuzz with energy, the feeling that inside me things are flowing and there's a charge, something that feels like electricity flowing and sparking and zzz. So I talk a lot about living a high vibration life, about raising our vibes, about buzzing. And that doesn't mean that I'm assuming, and certainly I'm not espousing, a scientific understanding of that process. It means that I recognize a way of being in the world that I can achieve, in which I feel more alive and more vital, more energized, and yes, more perceptive to all kinds of stimuli. I call that a higher vibration because that's what it feels like. It feels like I'm buzzing. If there's a better word for it that doesn't evoke any pseudoscience, I'd love to learn it. But for now, that's where I am with energy and vibrations. We don't know what it is. We don't know why it is, but it is something, and we've got to call these experiences something if we're going to talk about it. Okay, end of digression. So today's show is about all the little things that we can do in our everyday lives to help get us to that place, to help us live in that place, and to help us be oriented to the world sensually, and by extension, sensuously. Some of the things that I mentioned will be things that you're probably already doing, obvious things like lighting candles and burning incense, but maybe some of it will be stuff that you've forgotten about or maybe never even considered in the first place. So it's kind of like a long list with some suggestions, some ideas, some things that I do, and my goal is for this to be an episode to which you can return whenever you're feeling down or low vibration, or if some holiday or event has kicked your ass and you're looking to get back up, but you need some easy things that will help before you can tackle the harder things.
So
what do I mean by living sensuously? The way that I see all magic is that it's fundamentally about the senses, because that's how we raise our vibration, is through the senses. And I'm defining senses narrowly, empirically, so I'm going to focus on the 5 senses today. But to the extent that there are other senses that we don't talk about and don't articulate, they, I think, come out of a raised vibration, a higher energy level, a raised vibrational experience. And so sensuous living is kind of like what I see as the base of living magically. So I see an interrelationship between our sensory experiences and living sensuously, and the power of our magic and the draw of our magic and its relationship to the universe. So for me, it's a big deal living sensuously. And it comes out of, and this is going to be really much less academic, but I have to at least give credit where it's due. It comes out of a few different sources for me, thinking about it this way. And one is Audre Lorde's work on the erotic, her essay, Uses of the Erotic, and everything that's come since then. But Lorde doesn't mean the erotic as in the sexual, although she doesn't not mean that, and I'm not going to deep dive into that today. It's a broader, bigger, joy-filled, also deeper state than what we think of, at least in 2023, as erotic. The erotic is a different kind of concept. It's a little bit like another concept that I just want to nod to, the concept of flow by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. The idea of flow is that it's this single focused state that results in a deep state of bliss. And the erotic is similar, although Lorde is not concerned with focus in the way that Csikszentmihalyi is. The third source is a much more current book, and if you've not read it, I encourage everybody to read it, is a book called Sensuous Knowledge by Minna Salami. It's just beautifully written and really is building on Lorde's work. It's about epistemology and ways of knowing and the ways that intersects with Euro-patriarchal knowledge. So I recommend those 3 sources if you're interested in these things on a conceptual or theoretical level, and they underpin the way that I think about living sensuously. Part of this is definitely also my interest in gender and feminism. Gender socialization is such that women face unique challenges. And I mean women, all women, everybody who is a woman. I think we can really get stuck in our heads because we're responsible for so much in the world. And the standards are high, expectations are high, and you already know this, but it can be validating if you're listening to this and you're a woman to hear someone else say it. It's always good to nod along and say, right. But women are responsible for the emotional work of everyone else, right? We're responsible for making everyone else better. We're responsible for making us better. We're responsible for growth and transformation and birth. And then, of course, we're responsible for domestic spheres and increasingly responsible for work, especially nurturance at work and emotional work at work. What happens, I think, is that women get so exhausted and depleted and bogged down. And again, I'm not saying that other people don't, and it's only women who do. But women get it more because women are held to different standards and responsible for different things and socialized to be concerned with others in a way that other genders are not. I mean, not that we're socializing other genders yet in our history. We're really only socializing in accordance to the binary. But regardless, women are carrying different kinds of burdens and burdens that permeate different levels. And so what happens is that women can kind of live in our heads. And then self-care, what should be a routine part of life, becomes a kind of escape. It becomes a kind of shutdown where we can't go anymore or do anymore. And so we have all these narratives like, putting on our mask first and refilling our cup and all these justifications to take a respite, which we shouldn't need, but we do need or we feel we need, and some combination of the two. And then self-care becomes not a part of life, but bracketed, set apart, as a thing that we have to do in order to keep going. And that shouldn't be the way that it is. But at this moment in history, I think it's really been a way to help women facilitate even taking that step. And living sensuously, to me, is a way to help us out of that space. It helps us out of our heads, right, which is where all this is going on until we take the break and engage in the self-care where we're in our heads. We're in our bodies too, but women are kind of famously ungrounded without taking the efforts to be grounded because there's so much mental load that we're carrying all the time. And so living sensuously takes us out of that space and kind of forces us to live in our bodies in a moment-to-moment way. And I think on some level, this is one of the functions of practical magic. It's one of the things that it's really about, is to kind of remind us to live magically in every moment and to be in our bodies and to integrate our bodies with our heads. So first, I think that touch is probably the one that most of us overlook, or at least that culturally is the most overlooked, especially if you're really busy, or if you're single, or if you're older, because we sexualize it, right? Which is not eroticizing it. I mean, all of the senses are part of erotic experience. Again, I don't mean the experience of sexual activity. I mean the stuff that lights us up, the stuff that turns us on from the inside out, flips a switch and we're on, we're abuzz, we're alight. And so the erotic is really about bringing us from a state of stasis, a state of numb or unaware, to a state of alive and electrified. And touch, we really relegate touch to the sexual. We really culturally don't think about touch the way that we need to be if we're going to live sensuous lives. This is one of the few areas of life, I think, that women have an advantage, because we don't teach women not to appreciate touch the way that we teach men to, because it's so sexualized. It's also feminized, and we don't give room in our socialization, people that we assign as boys and understand as boys and treat as boys. We don't give them the room to appreciate touch at all. There's a lot of stigma there and a lot of other stuff to unpack. And again, this is all an episode for another day. But for now, the point is that we can and should all be thinking more, I think, in our lives about touch and its sensuousness. But women have more room to do so without ramification. That doesn't mean that we do, but we have the room to do it. It's really easy to underestimate the importance of touch. I think especially by the time you get to midlife. My Generation Z daughter, I think her entire generation is pretty touch deprived or touch averse or just out of touch with its importance. There is probably a relationship that I'm also not going to deep dive into now between technology and touch, particularly in terms of what touch means, right? Think touch screens and the one-dimensionality of all digital experience. I mean, I think there's a lot going on with the modern world and technology and touch, or not going on, as the case may be. But in part because we sexualize touch, it's really easy to not think about touch in other contexts, and it's so crucial. So how can we bring sensuous touch into our lives? Obviously, water is sensuous. Anytime you immerse yourself in water and you really let yourself focus on that, that's going to open you up to some sensuous living. Similarly, if you're not a bath person or you don't have the space, intentional showers can do the same thing. Many of us hop in the shower and we're clean and we get out, we go to work or school or whatever. But showering intentionally can make such a difference. Just elevate the experience to something else. I know a lot of Reiki practitioners incorporate Reiki into the shower. A thing I've only learned about recently, which is super cool, is taking a eucalyptus sponge, a bunch of eucalyptus, and it works fresh or dried, although fresh is more powerful. And you take the bunch and you tie it with a ribbon and you hang it over your shower head. And then, unless you're allergic to eucalyptus, when the shower hits and the steam goes, you're adding this spa experience to your shower, which is invigorating and it smells wonderful. I imagine you can do it with any bunch of fragrant branches. I mean, it wouldn't work with an herb like lavender because it'll get all over the floor of the tub, but any fragrant branch would work. You could just bunch them up and put them over your shower head, and now you've got a whole different experience where you're bringing smell in and you're elevating the sensuous experience of your shower. All things water, fabulous. And then fabrics. And I think part of this might also be a generational difference. I'm far too old to be concerned about what my clothes look like. That's also personality. I probably got a 20-year jump start on most people. I'm much less concerned with that, but I am super concerned about what my clothes feel like. And I am very much in touch with the feel that I want in my clothing. And that's going to be different for everybody. My daughter is also interested and in touch with what she wants her clothes to feel like, but it's a really different feel. So that's going to differ by a whole host of things: personality traits and gender, generation, etc., etc. But give a thought to how your clothes feel on your body. I wear big, flowy cotton. I very much look like a witch in my everyday life. Everything I wear is flowy and swishy, and it's all just very free and breezy, and that's how I like to feel, and I like my clothes to capture that, and it brings me sensory pleasure to walk down the street and have my clothes swishing around me. And then there's also a sound portion to that. I can hear it rustling in the wind, and I can really get a lot out of that just in terms of feeling like I'm in my body and I'm in the world, and I like that a lot. So yeah, give a thought to your clothes and what you're doing with your clothes regarding touch? Do the clothes that you're wearing feel good on your body? Do they feel good for you? And then the stuff, cozy throws for your couch, right? Or your chair and just your reading corner. What do you have there that you can drape over yourself that makes you smile, that makes you feel touched? Because the touch it's about feeling touched. Blankets are again, people have really different desires with blankets, but it's big when you go to bed at night, what your bed feels like. Becoming sensitive to attending and attuning to how your body feels in these fabrics. If you've got a bed that doesn't feel great, maybe you can invest in a mattress topper, something that's going to add some softness or some coziness. The other thing I want to say about touch is about texture. Paying attention to texture, naughty macrame stuff or jute rugs or blankets that have some roughness, like things that you like to touch. If you knit or crochet, are you working with yarns that you really like the feel of? And what difference would it make in your everyday life if you really enjoyed the feel of that yarn between the fingers? And as you complete a row of stitches, do you stop and caress them? Do you feel them? Or do you just keep on doing the job? Because really the touch is about what things feel on your skin, but it's also about your fingertips. It's also about living a life that's full of caresses. You're caressing things caressing you, kinds of touch that make you happy, the kinds of touch that bring you pleasure. I mean, that's really what sensuous living is, living a life in which all day you're in these sensory experiences. How great would it be to go through a day and all day you've been caressing things and feeling caressed and smelling great things and seeing beautiful things and hearing sounds that raised your vibe? I mean, you'd be buzzing all day long. That's what I think we should do, is we should buzz all day long in these wonderful, sensuous ways. Really kind of let ourselves roll around in how good it feels to touch. So a lot of this is about appreciation, too, of these particular senses. In some ways, it's a gratitude practice to hone in on the wonderfulness of being able to use the senses that we can use. Because we can't all use all the senses. Obviously, not all of us have access to being able to hear or see. And so being able to revel in the senses that we have is such a powerful experience. Okay, so sight. And they're all pretty obvious. I like to think that many of us are lighting candles all the time. I know that there's been a big movement in the United States to think about hygge, the Danish concept of coziness. That's Hygge. And part of that, I think, is people trying to cultivate this sense of comfort and cozy and love in their space. And candles are a major aspect of that, particularly in the dark months. Candles can bring a really deep sense of warmth and of comfort. But sometimes it's a lot. You come home from work and then you're not doing a spell but you're going to light a bunch of candles. Then you've got to blow out all the candles or keep an eye on them. Or maybe you're leaving in a little while. And so you don't really want to light 15 candles and then blow them out again. That all makes sense. But I would encourage you to do something to bring that energy into the house or into your room on a regular basis. If candles aren't practical, maybe you live in a dorm and you can't light candles all the time. But there are some really good fake ones out there these days. Like, they've come a long way from when I was in my 20s. I have some, they're made of wax and they come on a timer. And I've got them in pillars around my house. And I've got this taper ones in my altar, in my candelabra on my altar, which I put when I'm not in the middle of magic or not about to do magic, so that the candelabra is not empty. And then they glow and then they flicker. And no, it's not the same. I find it not as powerful as having real fire all around me, but it's a nod to that, and it casts a soft glow. I'm big on amber lighting and amber glows anyway, especially in the colder months. So that's one way to add a tiny little appreciation of something that you're seeing and its relationship to how you're feeling. That flickering, that movement brings your awareness to all the things that matter about your craft and about your life, and it's just one aspect. Another is art, and I don't mean go purchase billions of dollars of art somehow and put it on your walls. I don't have any art that cost me more than like $20 in my house, but a focus on prettiness on your walls all the time. When we have prettiness on our surfaces, then we have to do things like move them when we need the surface, or dust them, or in other ways caretake. And sometimes it can be kind of a pain in the ass to hang things on walls, but it can be worth the trouble if you put something in a spot, like in a room or in a spot in your room where you don't normally have a pick-me-up. You put a pretty picture up there, or even a poster, and then you can just use that sticky stuff. And it can be just a little visual boost, a little reminder to stop and appreciate the pretty. And these things raise our vibrations. And then, of course, color. I was actually I was really strangely oblivious to this for a long time. I like earth tones a lot. I like browns and greens and, just earthy kinds of colors. And for years, when I was married, for the last probably 5 or 6 years of my marriage, that's all I wore was black and brown and dark green, like a deep dark, not an emerald, but like that deep forest green. And I like those colors. But a friend of mine at the time said to me, "Why do you always look so drab?" Now, she did not like earth tones, obviously. She was a bright primary color kind of person, and I am not. So I just kind of poo-pooed what she was saying and said, well, I like these colors and you like those colors and, leave me alone. And I didn't think about it again until after I got divorced. And then after I got divorced, I found myself drawn to more color. I still love the earth tones, but I was for the first time really struck when I opened my closet door and there was nothing colorful. And I tend to like deep, saturated colors. I don't like bright, but I do like, jewel tones like emerald and ruby and sapphire and just deep colors. There was none of that. I mean, for years, I had just been wearing gray and black and brown and dark green, which again, I love the colors, but it really said something about the lack of sensuousnness in my approach to the world, that I was so limited, that my color scheme was so constrained. And that spilled over into the decor of my house. And it also intersected with gender, but that's for another episode. But it was really very interesting to me that I hadn't noticed it. And so I would encourage everyone to just take a look around at the colors that you're surrounding yourself with, at the colors you're opting to put on your bed and on your body and in your house, on your tables, etc. Whatever space you have to adorn with color, take a look around at the role that color is playing in your life. And is there a way to engage more deliberately and intentionally with color in your everyday in ways that won't cost you much in time or money, and in ways that will be a visual mechanism for raising your vibe a little bit? And then similarly, what can you redo in your living space or your working space? Maybe there's some decluttering that's linked to your emotional state that could happen. Maybe you can go to a thrift shop and pick up some trinkets, the opposite of decluttering, right? Maybe you need a little more cluttering up of your space right now. Maybe there's rearranging or redoing a section of where you live. One of the things that I did was fairly recently, actually, was redo my bathroom. Not redo like a big renovation project and contract or anything like that, but it's a very small bathroom in a very old house, and it was kind of rinky-dink, and the shower surround was gross, and every year I was trying to figure out, well, should I paint it again with this paint that is supposed to be waterproof, but it's not, and then it would peel, and then it would be nasty, and then when I took a bath, I'd turn all the lights off, but even a candle would show it off, and it was just kind of icky, and every year I was thinking about what to do, and so I finally covered it with that peel and stick tile, and then that led to other projects, and I put some plants in these plastic planters that I could attach to the wall in the shower. So now in the shower and in the bath and around my bathroom, I've got these kind of cascading plants, and I've got air plants in these little tiny plastic pocket stuck around, and it's really become a very transformed space. It was an investment. It probably took a total of 6 hours, and I probably spent a total of maybe $100 on it. And not everyone has the time or the money to do that. But if you have a limited budget, there are ways that you can redo spaces that are not conducive to bringing you joy visually, and things that you can do to kind of pick up that sensuousness through sight. And then finally, a really obvious one, but something I find that a lot of people don't think of for themselves, which is flowers. Pick up some flowers at the market, or if you garden, bring some cut flowers in. I mean, I know some people aren't comfortable with cut flowers for various reasons, but if you are, that pop and that bringing the outside inside can do a lot, and that's kind of a double dip, right? Because if you're bringing in fragrant flowers, then you also have another sense coming into play, which is lovely. But if you haven't gotten yourself flowers in a while, or found them or picked them from the side of the road, right? Sometimes on the highway, there are wildflowers in the spring. Keep your eye out and pull over and grab a fistful if it's legal. So again, nothing earth-shattering here, nothing that people don't already know, just a reminder to think about what you're doing in your space and your field of vision, and what you could be doing in your field of vision to give you a little miniature sensory experience, like a little mini pleasure, a little mini dopamine hit from your field of vision. So moving on to smell, like most of us use incense. I don't know most. I haven't done a study. Many of us use incense in our practices and probably in our lives. Maybe you're not using it every day. Maybe you like to have incense only for sacred uses. It's nice to have incense, I think, more frequently than many of us do. You could designate one particular incense for every day and another one for the sacred if you're drawing that, boundary. For me, I like to have a different fragrance in every room that I do. But I primarily use incense from Sea Witch Botanicals. They're fantastic. They're all natural. They're essential oil. They're not overpowering. They don't give me a headache. I'm very sensitive to chemicals anyway, and I don't use a lot of synthetic chemicals anywhere. But these are really wonderful, and she has such an array, or they have such an array. They, I mean, there's multiple people, not they, that I misgendered anyone. I'm just saying there are multiple people. They have such a selection, a handful, right, of different scents, and I like them all. And there are seasonal relationships too, and sometimes I change it. Some are more wintry or autumnal than others. But it allows me to have a scent that I associate with my bedroom and going to sleep, and that's different than I associate with my kitchen, and I really like that. I'm big on smells. You might not be as big on smells. But in any case, I encourage everyone to think about ways that you're using incense, and are there ways that you can do it that will boost your sensory experience, your sensory every day, that'll really, that smell when you walk into a room or you come home and it smells like home, or it smells like something that you appreciate and it's evocative for you. These associations, and I'll come back to this a bit later, but these associations, they boost our magic, they boost our spell crafting, and they boost our spell working. They contribute to an immersing in sensuality and in sensoriness and in all the emotions that we want to be experiencing more regularly on a daily basis. And it's really easy, I think, to take these things for granted because we're all so busy and life can be really hectic and chaotic. And in the past several years in particular, things have just been really challenging globally, right? The pandemic and politics, and it's just all been a lot. And I think whatever small things we can do to give us a little bit of a boost are probably worth the effort. Similarly, I do a lot of working with essential oils, and so I make a body spray or a perfume, and also linen spray. I make these on my own on a regular basis. It's really easy. Body spray is really just water and some witch hazel and essential oils in a spray bottle. And do your homework to know which essential oils you shouldn't be spraying on yourself. But it's really simple. And you're talking about just a few drops of essential oils. And I usually do like a 5-to-1 ratio of water to witch hazel. Now you've got a body spray that, that reminds you of all the things that matter. If you're choosing essential oils for particular therapeutic reasons or emotional reasons, you have that added association. And that's another boost. Or you're just personalizing it to you. I mean, you can make a different one for each mood or a different one for each energy that you're trying to maximize in your life. I just make a new one every time my body spray runs out and then forget the recipe and then start all over again and do a different one. But that works for me. I like change a lot. So that's a nice boost for me. I always feel good when I use that. And then linen spray works the same way. You can use vodka in linen spray instead of witch hazel, or you can just use more witch hazel and then spray your sheets. I would do it a couple of hours before bed. Otherwise, your sheets can be a little damp. You can spray your furniture, and then you just get that little boost. Just make sure you're using essential oils that are conducive to sleep and not ones that are waking you up. And then conversely, and I know, your mileage may vary on this. I don't like chemical scents personally, but also I believe, I'm convinced by the existing evidence, which is not as much as there needs to be, but always growing, that the chemical compounds in artificial fragrances are not good for us. They're not good for us on a whole host of levels. And so if you're inclined to do so, maybe take a look at what you've got going on in your space, smell-wise, fragrance-wise, that is artificial. Is it possible that these are blocking some energies or giving you headaches or affecting how good your breaths are and these kinds of things? Maybe just take a look-see and say, what are the smells that I would rather maybe not have here, and could I replace them with something else? Because I find that they affect my life profoundly, and they may not be yours, but I wanted to throw it in there. And then relatedly, if you have an air purifier that's sitting somewhere collecting dust, maybe dust it off and run it. Give yourself a little fresher air, or open the windows, right? Anything that gets the air flowing is going to improve the energetic flow, and that is going to affect how your room smells, even if it's not a conscious perception that you have. We are much, much more sensitive to smells as human beings than we think we are. We can notice only a small fraction of what we're actually smelling, right? So pheromones, right? For a good example, we know that we respond to pheromones, but we don't consciously recognize those. So we're super sensitive to smell, and so I think it's just really important to think about what are the sensuous experiences in your everyday life that are related to smell, and what are the ones that are working on a subconscious level that may be affecting your total energy flow or blockage. And just a note, a lot of you probably already know this, but if you've got an unpleasant odor in your house, or in your living space, if there are cooking smells or smoke, pets, or anything that is kind of dragging your vibe down, or you think might be, sage, of course, deodorizes. I mean, it'll smell like sage for a while, but when that fades, it deodorizes and there'll be no odor. And so can vinegar, and so can Reiki. You do Reiki or other energy work, you can use that to deodorize your space. So if you haven't tried that, give it a try. So I'm going to talk about sound next. That's also stuff you probably do, but I think a lot of us don't make enough room in our lives for this. Some people do, and I'm trying to be more like those people. But I certainly struggle to make enough space in my life or have enough intentionality in my life to think about sound. And so, I mean, obviously music comes to mind, right? Listening to music more often, listening to different kinds of music, and listening to music in different contexts. Maybe you're really good about listening to music on your way to school or work, or when you're doing the dishes, but you're not so good about listening to music when you're in the shower or when you go for a walk. And so switching up the context, adding music into different contexts, and also obviously exploring music in different ways, or new music. Look at the Spotify suggestions or whatever medium you use, or ask people for recommendations. See if you can expand. If you're not someone who listens to music often, either because you never have been, or maybe it's fallen out of your life because life, then maybe set a little bit of a goal. I'm going to listen to one song a day, just one song a day, 3 minutes. I'm going to spend 3 minutes listening to a song. You can set your alarm to play a song, or your Alexa routine in the morning. Set a little mini goal to listen to music. And similarly, maybe you listen to music often, but always while you're doing other things. And so when we listen to music while we're doing other things, two things happen. One, we're multitasking, so our attention is fragmented, which changes how we listen to the music, how we hear it, how we experience it. It certainly changes the extent to which it's a sensuous experience, and therefore it changes its impact on our vibration. That's one thing. And then the second thing that it does is if you're listening to music while you're doing the same things all the time. So for example, I tend to put on music when I have to clean the kitchen, because that makes cleaning the kitchen a lot more pleasant. But what happens is then you form an association, particularly if you're listening to the same kind of music. And then pretty soon, when you listen to a particular song or a particular album or a particular playlist, you're kind of feeling the same way you feel when you're unloading your dishwasher. And that isn't necessarily helping the sensuous living. I would encourage you to look at that too. Look at the context in which you're listening to music and what else you're doing when you're doing it. And can you mix that up a little bit? Can you set aside time to just listen to music, even if it's just one song? And just basically play around with what is the relationship of music in your life to your sensuous experiences, to how you're living in your body and feeling pleasure in your body and raising your vibration. Because that's the thing really to remember, is that music is pleasurable, but it's not just pleasurable, it also heals, right? It also has tremendous healing power because its vibrations we're so sensitive to the vibrations of music. And so music has tremendous healing power. So to remember that, it might help reestablish the sort of reverence and awe that most of us felt for music when we were little kids and first started experiencing what music can do for us in our hearts, in our energy centers. And we've since moved away. And again, it's very easy to take these things for granted in the modern world. And then, of course, there's other opportunities for sound beyond music, at least as we understand music. You might have a singing bell that you could play. You might have a bell on your altar that you normally use for magic, but just kind of walk by and give it a little ring-a-ding and revel in what it sounds like in that sort of crystal clear clanking sound that you get. And what is that? Where do you feel that in your body? And similarly for meditation bowls. And if you don't have a singing bowl, there's a million videos on YouTube or apps that play them, and there are ways to get that. There's also sound baths, which I'll talk about more in a little while, but they're kind of what I'm talking about, but in a much bigger way. If you don't know what a sound bath is, that's worth a Google. And there are plenty of those on YouTube and on Spotify and on probably all the music streaming apps. But they can be deeply healing. And there are different kinds. They're tuned to have particular effects on our bodies and on our brain waves. And there's lots and lots of options, and they're really kind of this immersive healing experience. And so that's a pretty cool thing to do if you want to incorporate more sensuous sound in your life, is to carve out time for a sound bath. Similarly, this is not really about enjoyment of sound, what I'm about to say, but it is about creating a space where sound can impact you better, where you can experience it more fully and more sensuously. And it's also a mechanism to do that. And that's clapping cleanses. I don't know how many people are doing that these days. It was big when I was a youngerling, but clapping is a really powerful way to clear spaces energetically. And if you've never tried it, then it doesn't take long at all. I strongly encourage you to give it a shot. Just find a room or take a room and find a corner. You should really do it in an entire room. So let's go with room. And what you're going to do is you're going to focus on the energy in the room. You feel where it's stagnant. You know, you do this probably when you smudge or when you do any magical workings at all. But attune yourself to what the energy is like in the room. And I'm sure there are different ways to do clapping. I'm not an expert. But it is something I do regularly and have fantastic results with, and have done it for other people with the same results. So give it a try. Really what you do, I start in the corners of the room. Some people start in the center and then return to the center. That's another way to do it. But I start in the corner, and what you want to do is you just want to crouch down low, and then you want to clap your hands in that corner. And as you're doing it, you're intending to clear the space, or in whatever specific intentions you might have. Maybe there's something negative in the space that you want to break up. Maybe it's stagnant. Maybe it's old and you want to refresh it. So bring your own intentions to it, of course. But you're going to use the clapping sound that you're making in your hand. You're going to clap from the bottom up, like I usually do every 6 to 8 inches. And you just go clap, 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 up as high as you can reach. I'm very short, so I have to kind of intend it toward the ceiling. But you just clap, and it takes me like probably 6 or so claps in each corner. And I usually do it a few times, especially if it's a room where I haven't clapped in a while, or a room where there's a lot of negative stuff going on. And then you clap in each of the corners. Some people do it in the directions of in the cardinal directions. But you clap in each corner, and then you clap in the center. Or if you start in the center, you come back to the center. And then you can feel around and see if there's any place that needs more clapping. But you'll feel the difference. You'll hear it. And you'll feel it. Clapping the energy in a room is very powerful. And then it attunes you to how we can hear energetic differences. And that kind of leaves you, I think, more primed to live sensuously, to feel the difference, to be aware of it, to direct your awareness to those kinds of things. And then lastly, on sound, and it's a similar thing to when I was talking about chemical sense, is to just kind of get yourself aware, if you're not already, to the kinds of sounds that are lowering your vibe, right? The kinds of sounds that you may not even be thinking about, that lower your vibration, that detract from your energy, that drain you, especially if you live in a busy area, or you don't think about this, or if you have a lot of people in your house. You're probably not attending to this because it's something that's just so kind of incorporated into your everyday. But if you really become aware of it, it can be really powerful to realize their effect on you. And then, of course, you can do something about them once you realize their effect on you. So you might have a situation where you don't really think about the TV commercials in the background and they don't seem to bother you, but they might be a drain, or maybe the neighbors are arguing, or there are dogs barking, or there's a downstairs baby crying, and this is just part of life, especially if you live in a city or if you live with other people. But if you start attending to the effects that they have on your energy, you may find that maybe some of them aren't so great for your energy levels and for your vibe and for your sensuous living. In which case you can find solutions to those: earplugs or brown noise, or engage in a sound bath or something that you'll be hearing instead, at least on a conscious perception level, instead of the sound that might be actually draining your energy or harshing your buzz. I mean, there's a reason that we have this language, vibing and buzzing and all of this, because we're supposed to be feeling alive with energy. We're supposed to be vibrating. And in the modern world, there's just so much that just drains it, that just quiets it and shuts it down. And it's very difficult to get the buzz up. And so becoming aware of the ways that what we're sensing, starting with the 5 empirical senses, is affecting and potentially draining or raising our buzz, I think is really crucial to living sensuously. And I think living sensuously is really helpful in our magical workings. Okay, lastly, I want to talk about taste. Now, I'm not a foodie. If you're a foodie, this one is probably much easier for you and maybe even not worth going into, because, you're all over the regular tasting of things and enjoying the tastes. But if you're not a foodie or you have any kind of issues around eating, then it's a lot more difficult, I think, to view taste as a sensory and sensuous experience. So I don't have a whole lot of tips on this because this is not my strong suit, but I will share with you a couple of things. I'm also not a gardener, and if you're already a gardener, and I know many witches are, you're already all over the difference between fresh produce and not fresh produce. I mean, it might as well be a different food altogether. And so you already know that. If you are not a gardener, though, and you've not traveled to countries where the standard is to eat what you've just picked, then the difference will absolutely blow you away. And so whatever you can do to get to a place where you can try a tomato that's just been picked off the vine, or et cetera, herbs especially, that is really a tremendous kind of potent, sensuous taste experience. So fresher food, organic food, local food, all of that is going to elevate your taste. The other thing I would recommend with food is breaking out of ruts, right? Trying new things, because newness itself is a jolt for us. Anything new in our attention, anything that we haven't had before, is going to kind of wake us up a little bit of a jolt, a little bit of a dopamine hit. If you're in a taste rut, think about maybe what flavors, what foods, what things you haven't tried, and see if you can increase some vibe that way. For me, it's a lot easier to think about taste with beverages. I like to try new teas. I think that fruit water or herb water is a really great way to wake up your taste sensation, wake up your taste buds, and give yourself a little sensuousness. Some of my favorites are strawberry and cucumber, basil. A lot of people like mint and obviously lemon. Just take some of these things and throw them into a pitcher of water and let it sit. You will find that your mouth is experiencing things taste-wise that you're not used to, and that's nice, and it gives you a kind of new dimension and a new roundness. It's really about correspondences. It's a kind of conditioning. It's a kind of creating these sensory experiences and linking them to joy and to awe and to presence and mindfulness, and all of that increases our vibration, and then it gives us more tools that become shortcuts. If you've been drinking strawberry water, you heard this and you were like, oh, I'll try strawberry water. And so then you've been throwing strawberries into your water. By the way, if you're buying conventional strawberries, give them a good rinse, maybe with a little vinegar, because they're high pesticides. So I wouldn't want them soaking in your water all day. But you're throwing strawberries into your water, and then the next day you're drinking it and you're drinking it. And so you're going in a few weeks and you're like, wow, I'm really having this great sensory experience with my strawberry water. And you've got that association. And so the next time you're doing some spell work, then maybe before you get your altar set up, you put the strawberry water in your chalice instead of regular water, right? Or you add strawberries to your moon water. And now you're bringing in that association. You're bringing in that jolt, that little sensuousness, that little wow. And that's going to help. We have to raise our vibration before we do our magic. And so all of these little sensory experiences, all of these things we can do to live more sensuously will help raise our vibration and then help make our magic better. I hope you'll join me next time when I'll be talking about Beltane, which is just over 2 weeks away. Beltane is a favorite fire festival for a lot of witches, and there's a lot to unpack. I'll be talking about Beltane themes and ways to celebrate the Sabbath by celebrating your Svadhisthana, your sacral chakra. I hope you'll be with me then. Thanks everyone, and take care.